I've always wanted to be a yuppie, and a couple of years ago I finally got to achieve my ambition. I'm no longer young or even upwardly mobile, but I do now own a 1984 BMW 320i. What is upwardly mobile is the typical asking price of a BMW E30 3 Series, not least a rare unmodified early six-cylinder car like this one. So in this video I'm going to be addressing a question that's still as relevant today as it was in 1984. Is the E30 3 Series really worth the price premium over its competitors? And does it live up to the hype? If you were to draw a word cloud of the 1980s, it would be full of words like brash and excess and greed and neon, and all of those things might be true, but the reality at the time was actually a bit more nuanced than that. Fashion is always a reaction, and the 1980s was a reaction to the 1970s, which had been all about big patterns and wide flares and all of those things. Fashion in the 1980s had an element of, you're going to laugh at this, but it had an element of restraint about it. There was definitely a school of thought which harked back to a previous, simpler, more elegant age. The 1950s were very in. Think of all those Sam Cooke songs and those kind of 50s retro Levi's adverts. Yes, there was the big thing about brands, but the brands that were really big tended to be more understated ones with a heritage and a tradition behind them, like, I don't know, Perrier and Mont Blanc pens and all of that sort of thing. Yes, that became sort of co-opted as conspicuous consumption because these things were relatively expensive. But the roots of it were in a yearning for a simpler, more elegant quality. And that is where the BMW E30 comes in. There was criticism of the E30 at the time for being outdated in its looks, but that was kind of the point and a big part of its appeal. It had that sort of understated classical elegance rather than a kind of brash newness to it. It doesn't look like it was from the space age. It looks like it was from a bygone age of classically well-balanced proportions and straightforward detailing that's really nicely executed. The build quality wasn't a myth. There's a real solidity to the way that the doors shut and the way that it feels and looks. Like the Mark II Golf, it really does deserve that reputation. These early ones particularly so. So these door handles are made of metal on these really early E30s. They were made of plastic on later ones, which was maybe the start of things going slightly wrong, but there's a real solidity to that. Some might say that BMW invented the compact sporting executive saloon segment with the E30, especially if they're getting ChatGPT to write their scripts. I can hear the original E21 3 Series and 2002 Tii, plus the Audi 80 GTE and the Triumph Dolomite Sprint, cracking their knuckles and asking the Lotus Cortina to hold their beer. It did come to epitomise the genre though, and certainly had a big impact on BMW. 2.4 million of them were sold worldwide between 1982 and 1994, which isn't bad for something that carried a premium for exclusivity. It brought both the need and the funding for a new manufacturing plant in Regensburg, and it really established the brand in the US, paving the way for the first BMW factory outside of Germany in Spartanburg, South Carolina. It was the E30 that really established the pattern of BMWs being available in a range of different body styles. So you could legitimately say it's probably to blame for much of what BMW is doing today. So there's that. So does it live up to the hype? What's it actually like to drive? It's plenty lively enough to do stuff like that and get you out of trouble. You'd want a 323i or 325i later if you wanted an out-and-out sports car. This 2-litre version is quick enough, I would say, without being really fast. You don't always want to go fast, because sometimes There are cows with big horns. I've talked before about how half the joy of this engine is not so much the power of it, or even the torque, which is ample, but the smoothness. But the real joy of it isn't the engine at all, fine though that is. It's the handling. It's so nimble. It's small, it's kind of got a wheel in each corner. Well, it does have a bit of overhang. You can just place it really easily. It's no bigger than it needs to be. It's beautifully balanced. The weight distribution is pretty well balanced. It's even better in the 5-door estate touring versions that came out later. Aficionados will tell you that those are the ones to have, and they probably have a point, but I think the 2-door is the prettiest. There isn't a 3 Series shape I dislike, really. Editing Martin here. I can't possibly post a video about the BMW 3 Series without mentioning these cars' prodigious reputation for snap oversteer in the wet, although I nearly did, partly because it was lovely and sunny for filming, and partly because some idiot let the on-screen talent write his own script. In truth, I've never had an issue with this car on modern Uniroyal Rain Expert tyres, although I don't drive it very often in the wet anyway. When I got it, it had a mixture of summer tyres and winter tyres, and one of them was a completely different size to the others, and the handling wasn't brilliant then, but since, it's been okay. But exploring the limits of the E30's adhesion feels like something for a track rather than the road, so maybe that can be a whole separate video one day. At the moment, my budget doesn't stretch to renting a track for a week in the hope of rain, but I will try and do it if an opportunity presents itself. When I was still at school, a friend and I designed some computer games, and we were all set to set up our own business instead of going to university and to make our fortunes do this. And I got to the point I don't think I could even drive at this point. I got to the point of getting hold of a 3 Series brochure. I clipped a coupon in, must have been Car Magazine, and picked out my options and my spec, and it was pretty close to this one. There were certain things that I had a bit of an obsession with electric windows, so I probably would have spec'd those, which this doesn't have. Anyway, it never happened. It came fairly close to happening, but then the bottom dropped out of the computer games market, and yeah. But that is definitely part of the reason that I love this car. Finally, I got one a couple of years ago, and it is everything I hoped it would be. Then I would have bought it for the pose value as much as anything. I didn't buy it for the pose value this time. I bought it for much more solid reasons of the quality and the dynamics, and I just adore the styling. The styling of the E30 was the work of Klaus Luther, who also gave us the NSU Row 80 and the original Volkswagen Polo, amongst other things, including later BMWs as well. The 8 Series Coupe was his work, as was the E36 BMW that replaced this in the early 90s. He's not a huge name like Giugiaro or Pininfarina or any of those, but actually, if you look at his portfolio, there's some really significant and very elegant designs in there. But this, for me, together with the Row 80, which was hugely influential, are his masterpieces. The thing I love about the styling of this is it's just so beautifully balanced. Everything is in just the right place. Yes, it's relatively conservative with the small c, but it's not pastiche retro. It's just distills elegant car design to its finest form, almost. Maybe I'm overstating it a bit. But for a 2 and then later 4-door saloon that isn't super long, it's not super low, it's not got that kind of sports car freedom like an E-Type to be really out there. Just the balance of it is just so right. I'm loving that modern sound technology means that I can do this voiceover with the sunroof open and the window half down. And hopefully I'm going to be able to get rid of the wind noise in post-production, because it would be a shame to have to do those up. It's a really hot day, although it's getting into evening now, and there's no aircon in a car of this age. It does have reasonable ventilation. It's got good heating in the winter. That's not much use to us now. The dash layout is great, everything is there and it's all kind of angled towards you, everything's at fingertips, it's really good. You've got this check panel up here which is kind of not in your line of sight but where you can see it, and any important things that go on up there are reflected in a dashboard light that comes up and gives you a warning. The gearbox falls nicely to hand and is quite a short throw, nice and firm. The steering is great. This one doesn't have power steering, it's unassisted, so but at driving speeds it's just spot on. It's super direct, really nicely weighted, the turning circle's really good, but the steering is a bit heavy on this one at parking and maneuvering speeds. This one needs a little bit of attention. The injection system on these early cars is Bosch L-Jetronic, or LE-Jetronic specifically, and it's a sort of partly mechanical system, and then bits of it are kind of operated by vacuum and water and all sorts of pre-solid state electronic gadgetry. Later ones had Motronic, which is much more digital, if you like. And it's a common upgrade to do because the L-Jet ones are harder to keep on song. And this one isn't really on song. I'm not sure whether it needs an idle control valve. Well, it doesn't have an idle control valve. It's got a thing called an air slide valve, which, in spite of what the name suggests, is water operated, I believe, and is irreparable and now irreplaceable. But it may just need more vacuum hoses replacing. I've replaced some of them. But there may be some other ones hidden away. It's all very complicated and quite Heath Robinson under there. The bodywork on this one is actually very solid. They do rust like anything underneath. This is pretty good. Actually, in fact, the rust on this is much more on the top because it spent a long time off the road under a cover in a garage somewhere and got quite scratched and chipped in that process. And then it lived outdoors for a couple of years, all year round, not in my ownership. And so it started to rust in various places. That needs some attention, probably quite soon actually. Certainly some of it needs doing before it becomes serious rot. But it's a really solid base to start from. It's done less than 70,000 miles. It's in really good condition inside. The dashboard hasn't cracked. The seats are a little bit worn where they always go, but really not too bad. So it's got the basis of being a really nice example. Here's the counterpoint though. In October 1987, Car Magazine did a giant test of the E30. They tested it against its arch rivals, the Mercedes 190e 2.6 and the 5-cylinder Audi 90 2.2e. The BMW won, but the magazine's main conclusion was clear. We reckon that for this money, there are alternative cars that would prove a more satisfying investment. They picked out the Citroën BX GTI 16-valve, the Saab 9000i, the Lancia Tamer 2-litre turbo, and even the Jaguar XJ6 3.6, which cost a lot more than the 325i, but only about 3% more than the prodigiously expensive 6-cylinder Mercedes 190, thanks in no small part to the value of the pound falling about 25% against the Deutschmark between when my car was new in 1984 and this giant test in 1987. And that was due only partly to high demand for small yuppie saloons. Much as I love my little BMW, I think that's a really interesting provocation, even today. I'd be genuinely interested to hear your take, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Keep it clean. In the meantime, if you want more E30, then click on this one next. And yes, these really are my clothes.